We all know that practice makes perfect, but I'm going to tell you specifically the 5 reasons that I never skip drawing thumbnails, and especially when I'm first beginning. So let's get right to it. We're going to measure and compare, and we're going to use the first thing that we drew, which is this sphere. If I stack it on top of itself, it's like 2.5 spheres tall. If I make my arrangement, my composition that tall, then I know that it's going to fit. So I'm just learning about this image. I just met it. I was introduced to it. Never seen it before. I want to get to know it because every time I look away, I forget a little bit. So if I've studied it for a while, there's a good chance I'm going to get more right because I've studied it. Another main reason we do thumbnail sketches before we get into a longer drawing, more polished drawing, is the fact that if you make a mistake on a thumbnail sketch, it's typically a mistake you would have made on a larger, more time-consuming drawing. So this is a way that we can get mistakes out of our system or get them over with or notice them before we're spending hours and hours on a drawing and realizing then that we've made a mistake and then having to redo such a large section. If you do a thumbnail and it's not what you love and you notice something you don't like about it, move on to the next. You don't have to spend half an eraser just erasing your whole drawing away. You just move to the next one. So it's a faster way to purge mistakes. Another reason is when we're trying to figure out which image we want to try or which composition we like the most. If we're studying a setup or a still life that's in real life, we may arrange it differently in each thumbnail to see if we like it. Instead of using a huge sheet of paper and drawing it all out and then discovering an hour later that we didn't like it or didn't fit, or we put it dead center and we wanted it off center, or we hadn't used our rule of thirds. This is a way we can iron out compositional faux pas or errors before we get to that larger scale. I liken it to trying on clothes where we're just trying it out. We're just trying it on. There's no commitment. There's not a lot of pressure. We can mess up and still decide to change our minds and not have wasted a bunch of time on it. So it's a great step to put in there before you start something that's especially above your skill level at the time and you're trying to stretch. This is a great way to ease into that. A lot of my students at this stage have not shaded a great deal of objects, so they're really not bringing a lot of confidence into this drawing before we start it. Doing thumbnails gives them an opportunity to do a mock-up of the values that are happening there and all of those relationships, which with 5 objects like this can get complicated. And if you do a little, almost like a taste test, a little bit of a thumbnail study, you can see where your darks are, where are your lights, and start realizing that those relationships of value help secure your underdrawing, maybe reaffirm some of your good choices or good arrangements. So using a thumbnail to study the values, the contrast, is going to be a huge component in making a beginner artist feel more confident going into a drawing instead of just like throwing them into the deep end and just hoping that they do okay with it. give them a little time, or give yourself a little time to get to know this and make those little mistakes and get them out of your system and move on to the real one, the big one. I encourage any beginner to do at least 2 thumbnails. You can always do more. It never hurts. It's just like any practice. The more you do, the better you're going to get. We usually take on about 4 for this assignment. I would say if it's a really complex drawing and you're feeling like you're taking on something that's a stretch for you, then definitely like 4 thumbnails. Study it at least 4 times. Start with a different object each time, or start in a different location of the composition. So maybe you start with a sphere on one, and then the next one you start with a cone, or you start with your boxes on another one, and see what is successful for you. Maybe which jumping off point leads you to better outcomes. Believe me, by the time that my students, or by the time you've drawn this 4 times, you are going to feel more comfortable with it. You are going to know it much more intimately than you did when you first started looking at it. There's not going to be a lot you haven't observed or noticed. When you're doing realistic drawings, what you don't notice does hurt you. So you have to notice it. You have to get sensitive to your observational skills. You have to fine-tune those. And thumbnails are just a time-tested way to do that. We're always hoping that these practices make us better. And if knowing more about thumbnails has made you a better artist, I hope that you will subscribe to my channel, come back for more tutorials. There's so much more to learn. And now you can use thumbnails in a really meaningful way to prepare you for your next big drawing. Thank you guys for watching. Have a blessed day and night.